Hey guys, what's going on? It is Brooke, or the Undead DM, and on today's episode of Homebrew Review, we are going to be going over the Pugilist class by Benjamin Huffman. This is one of the most sold pieces of homebrew on the entire DM's Guild, and has earned the title of the Adamantine Award, which is an award given to only the most successful pieces of homebrew sold on the DM's Guild. And today we're going to be taking a look at how strong it is, how it compares from its original version that I have here to its newer version, and my general thoughts on the class and see how it fares. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, for those who don't know, the Pugilist class is a class that was made to kind of fulfill the role of the street fighter, the boxer, the fisticuffs fighter. Basically, think of people like Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali, people like that, Floyd Mayweather. And people thought that the monk just didn't fulfill those needs. And they wanted a more unarmed strike focused class as opposed to a martial artist. And so Benjamin Huffman brought us the Pugilist. Now, I have here the original class that was released back in 2016, 2017, and the newest version of the class released in 2022. So, for those of you who don't know, this class is a martial class. It has very little spellcasting outside of one subclass, and it primarily focuses similarly to the monk on unarmed strikes and unarmored defense. So a few things you'll notice that are similar in both the original and the newest version. If I look into it, both of them are a D8. Both of them use Constitution. Both of them have light armor. Both of them have simple weapons, improvised weapons, whips and hand crossbows, the same choice of tools, the same saving throws, the same skills, the same starting equipment, generally the same. Fisticuffs is their first level ability, and it's basically martial arts for the pugilist, where instead of a d4, they get a d6, and when you use the attack action on your turn, and you make only unarmed strikes or attacks with a pugilist weapon, shoves, or grapples, you can use a bonus action to make a grapple or an unarmed strike. It's same thing as the original version, actually, except they added the little portion of unarmed strike, pugilist weapon, grapples, or shoves to give it a little bit more versatility. Overall, I think still one unarmed strike as a bonus action is fine. I think it's perfectly fine. Other than that, the fisticuffs is pretty standard between both. Iron Chin is their unarmored defense feature, but instead of it relying on dexterity and wisdom like the monk, or dexterity and constitution like the barbarian, it relies solely on constitution. And in both instances, it is 12 plus your constitution modifier, while you're only wearing light armor or no armor, and if you are not wielding a shield. The issue with this is that it doesn't have a lot of ranged attacks, and it's forced to be in melee. So you have a very low AC, and you also only have a D8 hit die. But you're also not going dodge tank like the monk. You can dodge, but you're going to see why dodging as a monk is a lot more effective than dodging as a pugilist. So in both instances, it's the same. It's 12 plus con. Next up is their key point feature called Moxie. Now, Moxie works very similarly to key points. You get key points at certain levels, and you get a certain number of key points or Moxie points as shown on the table, but they get significantly less Moxie points. While as the monk gets a total of 20 key points, the pugilist only gets 12 Moxie points. And they get 3 basic abilities, and they are pretty much the same between both the original and the newer version. You get Brace Up, where as a bonus action, You roll your fisticuffs die, so like a d6, d8, d10, or d12, depending on your level. Then you add your pugilist level and your constitution, and you gain that many temporary hit points. But you'll notice here, in the original version, they lasted indefinitely. So you could theoretically buff up your health before combat started, and have these throughout the entire dungeon to soak up damage from traps, or jump attack, or surprise attacks, stuff like that. But in the newer version, he limited it to they go away after 1 minute. Which kind of sucks. This means you don't really have a pre-buff plan for combat anymore. I can understand why he would do it, but at the same time I don't, considering how aid is in the game and the inspiring leader feat is in the game. So I think adding the 1 minute restriction is a little bit weird, but to Benjamin Huffman's credit, is a decent amount of hit points that you can use each turn as a bonus action. The old 1-2 is just flurry of blows. That's it. After you take the attack action, 1 moxie point, 2 unarmed strikes as a bonus action. That's it. Stick and move. You can, as a bonus action, you can either shove or dash. So the reason dodge tanking as a monk is a lot better is because you can dodge as a bonus action using patient defense, but you don't have that option here. Meaning, at maximum, if you maxed out your constitution and strength with this class, you have a 17 armor class with very little invested into dexterity. Because, mind you, if you're using your Iron Chin, your AC equals this. It doesn't say you can. Obviously, you could, but it doesn't say rules as written that you can choose to use Iron Chin. It just says this happens. So that means at maximum you have the same armor class as a Tortle. Meaning if you play a Tortle Pugilist, you basically don't have a change in armor class. It kind of sucks, but there's not really much you could do about that. Street Smart, basically you spend 8 hours in a place, and you can't be lost in there except by magical means. Not even magical means, I don't think. As if you were born there, and you cannot be lost by non-magical means. Yep, and you know where everything is. Bloodied but Unbowed. This is a pretty interesting ability. For the original version and the newer version, it's worded in a weird way. So, when you take damage that reduces you to half of your maximum hit points or less, you can use your reaction to gain temporary hit points equal to an amount, and you regain all moxie points. But you can only use it once per short or long rest in the newer version, but in the older version, you only gained your pugilist level plus your constitution modifier in temporary hit points. But in the newer version, it's 3 times your level. 3 times your pugilist level. This is still not good, because at level 3, when you get this ability, that's 9. And it's still not good, because at this level where you would get it, you would have 9 temporary HP for the newer pugilist, because it's 3 times your level. So that's 9 temporary hit points that you're getting as a reaction, as opposed to if you have a +3 at this level, that is 6. So you're losing it on 3 HP. That doesn't seem like a lot, but it is an improvement, but not by much. Not by much. This would be better if it was like 5 times your pugilist level. This way, at least at this point, you get 15 temporary hit points, because it has a very restrictive activation where you have to take damage. This is important here. When you take damage, that reduces you to half of your maximum hit points or less, meaning that the damage that you take from an attack has to lower you to exactly half your maximum or lower in order to activate this. So you're already going to be pretty much down. So activating this isn't really going to buffer it all that much, and the little extra health would be worth it if it was 5 times. It would be a little bit better. if it also didn't use your reaction, it just happened, but that's just me personally. Fight Club, that's your subclass. Ability score improvement, everyone knows what that is. Dig Deep, this is an ability that they gain at 4th level, where as a bonus action, on both instances, you gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage for a minute, and at the end of that minute, you gain a level of exhaustion. This is a terrible ability. An absolutely awful ability. Because think about it this way. A barbarian, as a bonus action, gains advantage on all strength checks and saving throws. They get to add additional damage to their melee weapon attacks, and they gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage for an entire minute, and they don't gain a level of exhaustion. The Berserker does, but that's a subclass limitation. This is the base class. Baseline, the Pugilist gives itself exhaustion. This is not a good ability. Especially since it's a 1-minute timer, meaning that either you or the Dungeon Master has to keep track of the round count, as well as the out of combat round count, to determine how long something's going to take before your dig deep just falters. And you also got to remember that if they're not using 1D&D rules for exhaustion, this is disadvantage on all your checks, and then your movement speed is reduced by half, and then you get disadvantage on more checks, then your HP is lowered by half, and eventually your movement speed becomes 0, and then you just die. So it's not as detrimental with the 1D&D rules, which I would assume this is what it was going for, considering how this was released in 2022, like mid-2022. So that's what I'm assuming he was going for, but under another assumption that this isn't what he was going to be using in the future, this is terrible. Extra attack, pretty standard. Haymaker. Whenever you take the attack action, you can make them all haymakers, meaning you attack at disadvantage on all of your attack rolls for the turn, but if you hit with either a pugilist weapon or your unarmed strike, they deal maximum damage instead of needing to roll. So disadvantage makes you go from a 65% chance to hit to like a 35% chance to hit. Roughly give or take like 35 to like 39. And dealing maximum damage and not needing to roll is gonna equate to roughly the same amount of DPR, if not losing some with disadvantage because you're multiplying it by a lower percentage to hit. So in terms of what the math says, which I will discuss in another episode of Homebrew Math. So in general, Haymaker is a decent ability if you, as a person, are okay with testing your luck to see how well you can hit. But in general, it's like Reckless Attack, but in the opposite direction. It makes thematic sense, but it's not an ability that you'd want to use all the time unless you know you are going to crit anyway. So if a creature's paralyzed by some means and you're going to crit within melee range anyway, you can make it a Haymaker and make it all deal maximum damage since you're not really rolling to attack since it's an auto crit. And disadvantage doesn't matter when you crit. So, Moxie Field Fists, it's the same as Key Empowered Strikes. Your fists and weapons become magical. Specifically, your unarmed strikes become magical. Fancy Footwork, it's a pretty standard ability. You just gain proficiency in dexterity saving throws. Nothing else. It's the same on the original version too. Nothing different here. At 7th level, you gain Shake It Off. And no, that's not a Taylor Swift reference, I hope. As an action, you can end one effect that is causing you to be charmed or frightened. Same thing as Monk. Monk gets a similar ability, I think, at an earlier level, if not a slightly later level. It's fine, but definitely not something that would definitely require an action. Yes, ending in a condition like Charm or Frighten on yourself requires you to make a save as an action anyway, so guaranteeing to get out of it is definitely good. So I guess it's fine. Personally, I wouldn't want it as an action. I'd prefer a bonus action, but that's just me. Down but not out. So at 9th level, when you use your Bloody but Unbound feature, remember that's the one where if you take a hit that reduces you to half your maximum hit points or less, you gain temporary hit points. So when you use that ability, you can choose to use down but not out. And if you do so, in addition to the temporary hit points granted by Bloodied but Unbound, you can add your proficiency bonus to the damage of your unarmed strikes and pugilist weapons for 1 minute. And it's only once per long rest. So this would be a lot better if it was once per short or long rest, because it seems like this is going towards the short or long rest type class, since it is a martial, and martials having a once per long rest ability is generally not that good, considering how they have to be as versatile as possible. So locking an ability behind a long rest, which is something that you're not going to get a lot of, is a little bad, especially for something so minuscule as proficiency bonus on damage. So, School of Hard Knocks. You have resistance to psychic damage and advantage on saving throws against things that would cause you to be stunned or unconscious. So all of the abilities I've mentioned previously have not changed from the original. So now we're just gonna focus on this until we get into a part that's actually changed. So this is fine. Resistance to psychic damage, an advantage on these two very specific effects. It makes thematic sense, as in, you don't want to get punched in the head and dazed, or 1, 2, 3 tap out, 1, 2, 3 knockout. So it makes sense. But as far as I am aware, there's only a couple spells that cause the unconscious condition, and there are a few that cause stunned, but not a lot. Rabble Rouser. So once you've taken a long rest in a settlement, you have advantage on all persuasion and intimidation checks against the people who live there. It's a ribbon feature, it's not really going to help you all that much. I mean, unless you're in like a tavern brawl and you could end it with just intimidating everybody. But this is primarily a roleplay ability. So, I believe Unbreakable hasn't changed. It has not. So, Unbreakable, you gain advantage on Strength, Dexterity, and Constitution saving throws. And in addition to that, you basically get a use of Indomitable from Fighter. So you could spend a Moxie point and re-roll a saving throw and take the second result. Like the Fighter, the optimization community kind of agrees that Indomitable should be an ability that just allows you to succeed the save. So this, because you can spend a Moxie point, and it's not a number of times per short or long rest, I think that this is perfectly fine, because 12 legendary resistances at maximum level, or at 14th level, 8 legendary resistances, which is 2.5 times the amount of legendary resistances that bosses get, is a little much. So I think where it is, it's fine. Maybe move it down a little bit to match Indomitable, but other than that, it's fine. Herculean, this is basically just a ribbon feature. Carry capacity is doubled. You deal double damage to objects. Your jump distance is the same as your running start jump distance. Ribbon feature, this late doesn't really matter. It's like Tongue of the Sun and Moon. It's like a nice little ribbon. Fighting Spirit is one that I know has changed. So prior, Fighting Spirit, you had to have 4 levels of exhaustion or lower, and in the newer one, you just have to be reduced to 0 hit points. That's it. And what it does is you get back up to half your hit points, you regain half your Moxie points, but I think in the original, you gain a level of exhaustion as well. And each one is once per long rest. Yes, so each one's once per long rest here. So, basically what this did before is that you had to use things like bloodied but unbound, dig deep, and down but not out in order to get your exhaustion up. Yes, I know down but not out doesn't give you an exhaustion, but you basically had to use your features that give you exhaustion to even be able to use Fighting Spirit in the original version. In the newer version, Fighting Spirit, you just had to be reduced to 0 hit points, and when you do, you gain half your max, half your moxie points, and you suppress all levels of exhaustion for 10 minutes. And after the 10 minutes, you gain a level of exhaustion. So, what I said before about dig deep being something that would be based on the 1 D&D rules, this Fighting Spirit ability makes me think the same. Because once again, if we're using normal 5e rules, this would kill you. If you were at 5, this would kill you. Just straight up after the 10 minutes. Unless somebody really, really wanted to cast Greater Restoration on you. And Peak Physical Condition. It is the same between both versions, just worded slightly differently. So it's Primal Champion, but instead of it increasing them to 24, it increases your Strength and Con by 22, to 22 instead of 24. And when you take a long rest, you recover 2 levels of exhaustion instead of 1, and you regain all expended hit die instead of half. So overall, the class is very, very weak when it comes to being a tank. It's very weak when it comes to damage. It's very weak when it comes to just general usefulness when in comparison to other classes. Like if we were to compare this to the monk, it is leagues worse. It has the same hit die, lower AC, can't really dodge tank very effectively. It has access to some ranged weapons in the form of a hand crossbow, so you could go the crossbow expert sharpshooter route, and they do count as pugilist weapons, and that means you could basically be dealing multiple d12s worth of damage each round using crossbow expert, because you can substitute damage of your pugilist weapons for your fisticuffs die. But that's about all that it's got going for it. Its Moxie point abilities aren't that much better, and its tanking ability seems to be solely based on your ability to gain temporary hit points. And temporary hit points go by very, very quickly. And they fight for action economy because you either have to sacrifice damage or tankiness. But your armor class is so low that the temporary hit points are gone within an instant. So what I would do to fix some of these issues is I would increase Iron Chin to maybe be able to match a like a full plate set of armor in terms of armor class. So maybe 13 plus your Constitution modifier. This way, if you max out Con, it could be an 18 armor class. Or if you wanted to go the really fun route, you can make this 15 plus your Constitution modifier, meaning if you maxed out your Con, you could get the same amount of armor class that a full plate plus shield wielder would use of a 20 AC. Or, if we don't want to go that route, we can make the temporary hit points better. So, Brace Up, it could be a roll of your fisticuffs die plus 3 times your pugilist level plus your Constitution modifier, and then make Bloodied but Unbound give you 5 times. So you're getting more, which is perfectly fine. Then everything else is pretty much good. Dig Deep, I think this needs to just be as just a thing that can happen. You just gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from now on. I don't think that this needs to be a bonus action like the Barbarian Rage, especially when they get it 3 levels later, and they hinder themselves by doing it. I understand the flavor of the boxer digging their heels in and being able to take more hits as a result, but mechanically, this being this late is just not, it's not good, especially when you gain a level of exhaustion for it. So either they need to remove the level of exhaustion here, or they need to give you resistance as like a free action on your turn that lasts for 1 minute. Haymaker's fine. It's not good, but the only way I could see this working is making it so that you do like double the total damage instead of double the weapon damage die. This way you can double the modifiers, so you can use things like Great Weapon Master with it too. That'd be pretty cool. Down but not out, again, per short or long rest instead of just by a long rest. Because proficiency bonus, yes, +6 to damage is nice at later levels, but once again, we're only getting to maybe +4 damage. So yes, essentially having an additional +4 weapon on your fists at all times is nice, but once per long rest, Short or long rest. Marshals need short or long rest abilities. If they do not have short or long rest abilities, and they only have long rests, they just do not function in dungeon crawls very well. They need short rests. Hard knocks, it's fine. Rabble rousers, fine. It's flavor. Unbreakable, like once again, I said it was okay. I wouldn't expect it to be a legendary resistance that you can spam. It would be unreasonable. Though if we wanted to do that, what we can do is we could say additionally, as a reaction when you make a saving throw and you fail, you could spend 1 moxie point to succeed instead. So you have to use your reaction to do it, much like how the fighter's Indomitable is now, I believe. So this kind of limits it to, yes, you can still spam it, but it requires you to use your reaction to do it, meaning you can't get an opportunity attack as well. Herculean, again, flavor text. Fighting Spirit, it's a lot better. It is a lot better. And the long rest actually makes sense here because it's a higher level ability. But at this point, just give them full HP and all their Moxie points back, and then remove all levels of exhaustion. Because at this point, it doesn't matter. Clerics can call upon their gods almost at this level perfectly. Fighters can action surge twice and 8 attacks a turn. Rangers can conjure animals and do more damage than you anyway. Just give them all of their HP. And even better, just give them temporary hit points on top of that, equal to 5 times their Pugilist level. Why not? They're already down, they're already in melee range. They're going to get hit because they're a low armor class anyway. Their abilities don't really allow them to tank exceedingly well. Might as well just, if they're down, pop them back up with full health, all their Moxie points, and 100 temporary hit points. Or at this level, like 80 something. I don't know what 18 times 5 is off the top of my head. But just give them a lot of temporary hit points. Like, okay, who cares? 90, so it's 90, I apologize. So just give them 90 HP, 90 temporary hit points, why not? And peak physical condition, I think it's fine, but maybe the exhaustion recovery needs to be somewhere lower, like maybe shake it off. It could be good. This way you can get your levels of exhaustion down quicker. But other than that, I think this is an overall very weak class. It could use some tuning. I might make my own version of it eventually, with credits to Benjamin Huffman, of course. And hopefully that he will see this video and take into consideration some of it, especially when I'm going to come out with Homebrew Math. But anyway, I know I didn't get to the subclasses, so I'm going to try and cut these videos a little bit shorter, and I'm going to cover each subclass in their own video. So until next time, guys, I hope you all enjoyed the video on the Pugilist class by Benjamin Huffman. Like the video, comment, subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video and the next video of Homebrew Math. See you later.